Hello guys and welcome back to another video. Not that long ago, I bought a tapered edge 2012 27-inch iMac for $100 off of Facebook Marketplace. But it does need a new hard drive, and that does require a little bit of work to get inside one of these, so let's get started. Here we've got Apple's mid-range 27-inch iMac from 2012, a far curvier Mac than one's released 1 year prior. This is the tapered edge design with incredibly thin edges, making it look super slim from some angles. And since it's been sitting around for over a year, it has accumulated a fair share of dirt and grime. I'll be honest, I forgot I even bought this until I looked through the shed recently. Now the next question is, does it still function in any way? After plugging it in and firing it up, it made the boot chime and the display did indeed power up. The owner said the hard disk had failed, which seems to be the case, but just to be sure, I put in an install USB to try and format the hard disk. A drive was indeed detected and was able to be formatted, but it clearly needed replacing. This would have really sucked if it was my drive and I had files I needed rescuing. I wonder if there's software that could have helped in these situations. And today's video wouldn't be possible without Wondershare's Recover It data recovery software. If you've got data that's become corrupt, lost, or damaged due to virus attacks or from a crashed computer, Recover It allows you to scan and preview files for free. No data, no charge. Something I've done before is accidentally wipe an SD card full of footage I just shot but not yet backed up. The first step is to use the link in the description to download Recover It, select your operating system, and once you've installed the program, choose your affected drive. This SD card, even though it was technically wiped clean, all of the video files were detected and able to be recovered. Even some footage shot years ago, multiple drive wipes ago, were surprisingly still present. Recover It supports over 1,000 file formats across an array of file systems, and there are solutions for so many different types of scenarios. Even a failing hard disk that couldn't even load into Windows anymore had success with Recover It. Files damaged due to corruption or being overwritten could even be somewhat repaired. So if you need to recover data from SD cards, PC, Mac, external hard drives, or anything else, consider Wondershare's Recover It software. Click the link in this video's description to download Recover It and try it for free. Before we take things further, I think this Mac could do with a wipe down, and I can't recall if it was this dirty when I bought it or not. It does seem to have some sticker residue around the edges on the back. Perhaps from the protective cover it would have come with originally in the box. The display panel itself was also filthy, but thankfully undamaged and free from scratches. Opening up these newer tapered edge iMacs isn't as easy as it was with earlier models, requiring some specialized tools. Previously, the glass was held in place with magnets. The glass and display here are held on with fairly strong adhesive tape. iFixit makes suitable tools and sell replacement adhesive strips. The first step to this disassembly is a laborious one, and if you don't take your time, there's a real chance you'll crack the glass and damage the display. The pizza cutting tool was used to start separating the adhesive, but it's intentionally very small. To avoid damaging delicate components around the display, don't use a knife or a real pizza cutter, but also be sure to repeatedly go over the same areas without too much pressure until the cutter is all the way through. The glass can flex a small amount, but if you move too quickly, it can definitely crack. The next step involves separating the frame from the glass with plastic cards. The iFixit tutorial says to avoid inserting them past 9.5mm. I simply wrap the cards in tape to help avoid just that. It's best to lay the Mac down on its back for the rest of the disassembly. It would be disastrous to have the panel fall forward and snap off the connectors. These cards will finish off whatever adhesive is left. And don't run them past the webcam though, as you may damage the assembly on the top of the screen. With the use of the suction cups, I slowly lifted the panel. There are two connectors that must also be disconnected from the display. They're a little tricky to reach if you're doing this assembly alone. I would suggest propping up the display ever so slightly to free up your hands. There is still some adhesive at the base of the screen, gently lift it up. Then use the pull tabs at either end to easily remove the tape. All this effort just to get inside the computer, and I wonder if the magnet design was scrapped to try to make it slimmer. Either way, we've finally got the hefty panel free from the casing, and while it was still fresh in my mind, I went ahead and removed the old tape from around the edges. I thought it was going to be a rather messy, time-consuming task, but nope, it was very easy. The first internal component that needed removal is the left speaker chamber. The power button also runs around this, so be sure to disconnect it from the power supply. The whole thing slides up and outwards. Given the size of the speaker, I hope they sound good. The failed hard disk will be replaced by a 500GB SATA SSD, and it's held in place with some rubber grommets to reduce vibrations. For the next step, you've got to be very careful as there is a risk of electric shock while removing the power supply. Avoid touching the exposed solder joints and be sure to disconnect the two connectors underneath. The right speaker took a considerable amount of wiggling to get out. It extends all the way to the vent at the base of the Mac. And the reason we're digging in further is to reapply thermal paste and clean out the potentially clogged up fan. The 27-inch model uses a single large fan to cool both the CPU and graphics processor. I read a good comment on the iFixit tutorial that said you should color code the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth antenna connectors, which will prevent me from putting them back on in the wrong order. It's also worth making note of the logic board screw locations as there are a few different types of lengths and sizes. With the last of the screws hidden behind the SATA cable, which also needed to be dislodged. Following a tutorial is honestly vital for this repair as I would have never seen the ones here, and after double checking no other connectors were attached, the board could be lifted up and out. Getting the cooler off requires the removal of two different brackets, one underneath the graphics processor and the other underneath the CPU, which has little warranty void stickers, and considering this is a 10-year-old Mac, they probably don't matter all that much. The CPU will also come out with the heatsink since it isn't really socketed, it just sits in the slot. The tension of the bracket keeps the chip in contact with the board, and the old thermal paste was definitely holding it onto the heatsink. The processor in here is a quad-core 3rd Gen i5. If I'd planned ahead a bit better, I could have put a better one in, but this system will be somewhat limited by the graphics card anyway. The graphics memory chips have small pads, which I decided to leave intact since they're still soft and malleable. Unlike earlier iMacs, the GPU is a part of the logic board, so it isn't possible to swap out due to failure or simply to upgrade. So keeping the chip nice and cool is crucial. This paste is about 10 years old and was definitely due for replacing. I then went through and dusted off the board, being sure to dislodge all the dust trapped inside the USB ports and SD card reader. There was also a surprising amount of dust at the ends of the speaker chambers as well. Somewhere the dust was seemingly absent from was the fan. There was only really fine debris on the blades themselves, which I took my time to remove. Even though this Mac seems a lot slimmer than previous models, there is still a surprising amount of empty space inside. This may have helped accommodate larger internals for models in later years, but I'm not sure as I've never taken a newer one apart. And quite frankly, I hope I don't have to take another one of these apart, mainly due to the taped on display. I thankfully realized there was also old tape left on the display panel side. You really wouldn't want to stack that on top of the new adhesive strips. And now with the new thermal paste applied, the reassembly could begin. Proper alignment of the logic board is very important. According to some comments left on the iFixit tutorial, you'd want to put devices in the ports to make sure they actually fit. The last thing you'd want to do is piece the whole thing back together to find out you can't even use the ports. You definitely had to go to a bit of extra effort to redo the thermal paste, but now I can guarantee this machine will run as cool as it can. In place of the failed hard disk, I'm using a 500GB SSD that I previously used inside my 2011 27-inch iMac before it became a standalone display. But is that cheap Mac still functional? Well, before I go to the effort of seating the display panel, I thought I'd see if it plays the boot chime. It relievingly does. I purchased some new adhesive from iFixit's online store. I've laid them out to get a good understanding of their positionings. I decided it was easier for me to adhere them to the frame first, leaving the other side alone for now. As you've only got one shot to get it aligned, as it's nearly impossible to separate it again without damaging the tape, I'll start by taping down only the base of the display as I connect the delicate display connectors. This allows me to line the panel up to the frame as well, before I completely tape the screen down. I took this opportunity to power up the Mac, which seems to run without any problems. And finally, I could slightly open the top of the iMac and take off the second side of the adhesive strips. And there we have it, the Mac back together, working, and most importantly, with the display undamaged. Upgrading the RAM can be done conveniently by removing this small door. I added 2 more 4GB sticks, bringing the system total to a very usable 16GB. And last of all, I cleaned off the remaining tape residue with the help of some eucalyptus oil. Success. It still seems to be working and accepts the RAM. And yes, I do realize I could update to a newer version of macOS, however I have some apps that I can't even use past 10.4. This drive has a lot of older files on it and it's set up right where I left it a few years ago. This Mac can still play basic games. Going onto my Minecraft server is very much possible. The display is also very bright and the colors are vibrant. Older games such as Team Fortress 2 running at 900p are also quite playable. Thankfully, there are a number of games on Steam that support this old hardware. Another one is CSGO. At a resolution of 900p and the graphics set to low, it plays and still looks pretty good. For content creation including photo editing, this Mac has an excellent display panel, and I'll probably keep it and use it myself for future YouTube thumbnails and picture edits. Back in 2012, it would have been absolutely worth it to pay a little more for the 2GB 680M graphics upgrade, and paying for the quad-core 8-thread i7 CPU would have also future-proofed this Mac for many extra years. This slim tapered edge design remained in Apple's lineup for nearly 10 years, and I think it still looks really nice even to this day. It's just a shame that it's quite hard to get to the internals. So there we have it, a decent iMac for a decent price. It is, however, a real shame that the graphics cards are part of the logic board, because it would be great to do a graphics card upgrade and make this an even more usable machine. However, that isn't possible without replacing the entire logic board, so maybe just forget about that. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.